Welcome to the Warships Podcast with your host, Kellorn, Venacera, and Aaron.
Hello and welcome to episode 116 of the Warships Podcast. Today we have special friend of the podcast, iEarlgrey, who we all knew before he became part of Wargaming, and we're very happy to still be his friend. We hope now that he's part of Wargaming and still living in Saint Petersburg. So the last time we talked to you was you had just gotten to Saint Petersburg not too long before. You've been there like 6 months now, Gray?
Yeah, it's coming on for 7 months now, and God, that seems like a while ago.
So everything's still going well? Any cultural adjustments that you've had to make?
Absolutely fantastic. The cultural adjustments, not too bad, given St. Petersburg's sort of pretty international, but I'm doing evening lessons of Russian, which is, that's proving challenging. So you have a day at work, and then you sit down and you have to learn a completely alien, not just foreign, completely alien alphabet, which also has its own handwritten alphabet as well. So you got to learn 2 alphabets and then all these rules. So I won't go into details on that, but let's just say it's hard to do at the end of the day.
So is that progressing along nicely, or are you hopelessly behind, like as though you were actually an American, not an Englishman?
Normal. Could be better, okay? I'll say I'm a plохой student, which just means I'm just a bad student.
Have you learned how to do the squat, though?
Sorry, say again.
Have you learned how to do the squat?
The squat, the apple dance. That's what I think you mean. So, guys, you go down sort of on squats and kick out the legs.
Sure, let's go with that.
That's a naval apple dance, and the idea is you balance something on your head, and the prowess that you get is if you manage to keep it there.
Well, we'll keep us informed on how that goes. It's funny. The reason I mentioned that, Gray, is that the overseas traveling that I've done, nobody expects Americans to speak any other language, and when they do speak another language, they're terrible at it.
Yeah, people are actually, I think they like the challenge of reaching back to their sort of high school English, because obviously it doesn't take long to work out I'm an Englishman. So then you'll see a sort of slight panic flash across the eyes, then you can see the cogs spinning in the brain, and then a phrase will come out, and it's quite surprising what people come out with.
Yeah, no, I've always been impressed by the number of people that speak English around the world that I've met. So that's kind of neither here nor there. So we'll get on to actual World of Warships topics. So I guess a question for you is, you kind of got thrown to the wolves by Sub Octavian here, because originally you were going to try and get him to do this, and then he's like, no, Gray can be the one that gets ripped apart on the podcast, right?
Yeah, I'll take it as a vote of confidence.
Probably wise. Well, guys, if you didn't know, today we're going to be talking mainly about the CV rework, and then kind of, what are some of the other things that are happening in the upcoming things for World of Warships in the next year or so. Luckily, Gray was kind enough to talk to us about it today, because it's honestly been a bit of a controversial topic. So I guess before we get started with our questions, Gray, has it been as controversial internally for you guys as it has seemed to be for the community as in general?
Not so much controversial. Obviously, this is something that has undergone a lot of thought and planning. I had an early play test as well before it even got into the hands of CCs, and even what we're playing with now is miles different from there. But no, I wouldn't say controversial. We were all aware of the reasons why it needed to change and the targets that we wanted to achieve in that change.
Fair enough. Well, the very first question on my list has to do with that, and it's how and when did the CV rework get started? And what were some of the important milestones over the course of the rework?
Yeah, and this is a really good question, because it will give you a pretty specific idea of just how long I'm talking. So this kernel of an idea with the rework sort of really kicked off between November and December of 2017. So we're talking, not long from now. So what's that, 2 years ago now? Am I getting my head around it?
About a year. I'd say like a year and a quarter or something.
Yeah, year and a bit. God, it feels longer. So yeah, that from there to here, that gives you a sort of an idea of the time frame that things have been going through and been under, and the objectives that we were trying to achieve I have been stated sort of in the dev blog, but for those listening who didn't catch it, I'll go through them a little bit. So we wanted to iron out a bit of that, how do we call it, a complexity curve that aircraft carriers imposed on players. It was not only a different sort of genre of game that you were playing, but it came with its own rule book almost, and it was quite a wall for people to climb. Those who successfully climbed it, of course, reaped the benefits, but it was very jarring for players. So we wanted to address that and make it more accessible, which has been quite an open sort of objective. Along with that, of course, we wanted to make it more enjoyable. So accessible and a rewarding and enjoyable experience to have. We wanted to make it visually attractive, of course, give people immersion, I think you'd add into there as well. With the RTS, you're kind of a little bit distant from it. Yes, you've got the top-down view, and I'm sure people who love RTS get very much immersed in it. But for, let's say, the rest of the players, it was a bit too distant for them. We wanted also to give more space for utility of aircraft carriers, and improve the relationship between aircraft carriers and the team and the enemy. And by that, I guess Alpha Strike comes into it. It's not particularly happy for certainly the enemy, or if you're on the receiving end of the enemy carrier, to just be harassed and then deleted pretty much in one fell swoop. So you'd have those torpedoes coming in, and then you'd probably be finished off by a fire from the dive bombers that were lagging behind. So overall, we wanted to create a balanced, integrated class that will enrich the game and be an asset to the game, as opposed to one that we felt was potentially degrading the experience for others, both when they attempted to play it and maybe they'd be prompted to play it because of the power that they had been on the receiving end of. So overall, improving it and then balancing it.
Fair enough. And I guess, like I was saying, is what were some of the milestones? Like, through it, you said it started in November, December of 2017. What were some of the kind of the important touch points between then and now? And I guess, were there any setbacks?
Sure, there were a number of setbacks, and they were to do with sort of bugs, and also overall the whole thing took way more time than expected, and I think that's pretty understandable. We've really obviously I don't want to broach a separate topic, but we've already taken a long time to get to where we are. So when the community might feel things are rushed, it's definitely not. It's quite the opposite. There's been a lot of back work that's already gone into it, and we're not claiming even at this point in time that it's finished yet. We're very much fully aware of this evolution that's going on. With regards to milestones, actually, I wasn't here and wasn't privy to all that groundwork that laid in. But even from just my playtest experience and seeing the gameplay as it's evolved, we've added a lot more information to players who are actually playing it. We've added, we both had and then I believe took away torpedo bombers from the lower tiers and added them back based on feedback. So there's been other aspects like these unsummoned fighters and things like this. We've really had to tweak and adjust a lot of aspects as the game's evolved and as we've had issues that we faced.
Yeah, it does seem like it's been a arduous process for you guys and for the community as well in a lot of ways. I guess, is there any kind of funny stories or anecdotes that you can tell from of things that happen maybe behind the scene that make some people be a little, a lot of people are very serious about this rework, and I'd like to lighten it up.
Sure,
for people.
Sure. I did manage to get one little anecdote that I actually did find amusing. Apparently, according to the devs in the early stages of development, there was a bug that was come across where each time the player moved the mouse, the server was sent information about it. So we only tested it on ordinary mice, and we didn't really notice anything. But then when it came to players with gaming mice with this high DPI, it just sort of crashed out the system because you had the a massive amount of packets and data being just crashed and overloaded on the server. So if you think about all the micro movements you make with the mouse, for some reason,
my 15,000 DPI mouse was causing problems.
Yeah, it was like probably sending 15,000 different signals every second or something to the server, so that had to quickly be smashed on the head. But you can imagine the problems that caused.
That would explain some things, actually. So
yeah, I mean, we did hear about server instability. I guess that explains it.
Yeah, and these things, as I've just highlighted just one tiny little instance of where internal testing, where we're using maybe standard issue Office mice, just on a basic machine. Maybe we don't all have what I've got, which Logitech. I've got a Logitech G402 that I've brought in. We don't all have those, and if you're trying to get like a whole suite of people in a closed environment across a number of computers, obviously they're not all going to have the latest and greatest Razer mice. So it's quite funny that just a standard office supply mouse was fine, but then you take it to like proper players, and then whoopsie, you've suddenly got a weird issue that you could never, you're unlikely to have foreseen.
The 402 the precursor to the 502, because the 502, the G502 is what I use, and I love it.
Yeah. We shouldn't be plugging products without sponsorship. So come on, Logitech, get sponsoring.
Yeah, get us some sponsorships here, damn it. I want to move on to talking a little bit about the current state of the rework. So the testing of the CV Rework on the public test server has been pretty contentious at times. And over the last week, a pretty significant number of changes were released to the PTS, including changes to defensive AA fire, the addition of torp bombers at tier 4, and some other bug fixes that we're going to see in the upcoming third round of public testing. I guess, were these changes in response to the community feedback, or were they more internal, or was it a combination of both?
I'm trying to think in my head, like if I could give it a percentage towards how much is community feedback. So obviously, when we bring the concept, we have certain ideas of how it looks and feels and how it should work. But then when you give it the hands to the community, they come up with amazing suggestions or reasons why perhaps this certain idea didn't fit into the game. So I would say a good majority of the changes that we've witnessed are based through our efforts of monitoring all the kind of ways that people give feedback, be it YouTube comments, Reddit, forums obviously are a big one. Certainly in my job, my particular role is to then get that feedback from not just CCs personally, but the CCs communities as well. So if people are talking in a Twitch channel, perhaps, about or the comments in YouTube, the CCs will then report that to me, and then that all gets fed into the system. So one obviously to highlight is the addition of torp bombers. I think have you featured Farazalith on the podcast?
A number of times. He is quite outspoken, let's say.
Yeah, he is. And I've often spent the work day with some of his videos, and I've been really grateful to him personally to see someone else take these tools that they're given and really work out. Like, for instance, I didn't have the chance to play test enough to attempt to try those waves of torpedoes that he tried. That was cool to see, and all of that stuff, and then I can feed in to help improve it. So it's people like, obviously I'm gonna cite Farazalith as he's one of the CV mains that has been putting out some good content out there that has been very useful. So that's just one avenue of feedback where things have been based on, and then it gives me the opportunity to give an illustration, because obviously people can, not saying that just written text is useless, but it's just one dimension, and then when you can see it acting, then that's a good sort of building block to go from. Defensive AA, Notz has put out quite a few videos on his thoughts on it, so we're looking to improve that. As I think listeners of the podcast will already be aware, we've decided to push back 08.0, and that's again kind of partly based on community feedback. It's also to give us time to implement these changes based on feedback, and maybe some more that the devs have got in mind as well. So we definitely are listening to the community, and a lot of changes we're very grateful to the community for.
I mean, I love Farazoth. We've had him on the podcast a bunch of times. There are some times where it feels like he can be very frustrated. Maybe that the changes are happening, a little slower than he might like. I guess has there been any resistance to kind of incorporating some of the player feedback? You said you collect a lot of it. How receptive have they been on the dev side to, the stuff that you present to them from the community?
On the dev side, obviously very, very receptive. Anything we can do with good reason that fits the brief. And this is something I've had to illustrate to Farazelleth on a number of occasions. So there is one key feature that Farah often is often crying for is I want to be able to control my CV at the same time as my aircraft. And this is something that I've had to repeat to him. It just isn't actually going to fit with the brief of where we want something that's consistent with the main game as well. So in the main game, you will have your ship, and you can go to the tactical map when you're in your destroyer, cruiser, or battleship. You can still do those things, but you can't sort of fire one armament and then be simultaneously launching an attack with another armament in the normal ship of the game. So why is it justified in his mind if you can do both? So to be able to he wasn't sort of saying about cycling through plane squadrons, but you're sending your planes towards a battleship, for instance, and then you're switching back to your CV and you're dodging a destroyer, so you're using your secondary batteries against him. So you're kind of in that sort of scenario, you've got the opportunity therefore to control two almost weapon systems or two systems that you wouldn't ordinarily have in any other vehicle in the game. So we do not want to give that to people. And I do sympathize with Farah. And yes, you've mentioned about his frustrations. And it's a massive change for people like Farah. I sympathize actually. When I first did the gameplay test, I did cry a little bit inside that I was losing my Saipan, I have to say, because that was my little secret pleasure, little guilty pleasure. So for players like Farah, I do sympathize, and there is going to be some frustration on their part. But the feedback that players like himself are giving us, we do need to keep it within the parameters that we have set for the good of the rest of the player base and to achieve what we want to. There might be some compromises on the way that we can and are willing to make, but there's also others that we just aren't, for the reasons that we've cited. With the overall state of the rework, obviously we're not exactly happy with it at this point in time, hence the delay. So we're going to improve it. But overall, yes, we're pretty happy with it so far. But then we've got the next test of the live server scenario. So there's still more work to do.
So that actually leads directly into my next question is, in your mind, is the CV rework ready for patch 0.8.0? And I guess, even, we've talked about the fact that it's been delayed, but is the delay, do you guys still think that it is going to happen in 0.8.0 and not get thrown back to like 0.8.1?
At this point in time, from my understanding, yes, it's ready to go with the delayed 0.8.0. So with the changes that are going to be made, it's therefore in our mind ready for the live server. And I got to kind of use this term carefully, testing, so to speak. We have been quite clear with the players that when it hits live, there will be a period of adjustment. So there's some caveats to that statement that, yeah, sure, it's ready for 0.80. What I think is better to say is we're ready to take it to the next stage.
So I guess internally, are you guys calling what is going to be put into 0.8.0 as a final version, or is it like a beta, like a late beta version? Or I guess how are you guys thinking of it internally, at Wargaming?
Fairly close to the finished product. So we do need to have that room to adjust things. Hence this sort of warning to the player base that they are coming, but we are going to need to adjust them. So they're close, but we acknowledge the fact that there are going to be areas that will still require tweaking. Whether you call that late beta or if you think about any other ships that are in the game, we do change them from time to time. So were they therefore not finished before, so to speak? They're close, near as damn it, if you want to use an English phrase. We're very close to it. So we're happy for it to go to the live server with the changes that we're planning.
Can we get the ranked sprint season that's CV only after the rework happens?
CV only. I doubt it. Nice try.
That would be kind of amusing. So I do have a couple of questions today are going to come from other sources. The first one is coming from Halcyon, and he says that from a developer standpoint, does the rework affect competitive gameplay, particularly in regards to plane spotting? And how heavily did competitive gameplay aspects weigh during the development?
Well, yeah, the competitive aspect is always in mind when we not just with like a class, but also with the ships we introduce. With the class, yeah, the last thing we want is to exclude a class of player actually as well at times. If we lend back into Farah, someone who chooses to dedicate themselves to a specific class, we definitely don't want them excluded. So we, in theory, new aircraft carriers, if we'll call them that, the new gameplay of aircraft carriers, we hope and we believe they can find their niche in the competitive arena. Whether in reality they do comfortably, time will show, and we will see in 08.0 with the clans. No doubt they'll get their hands on them and they'll have a play, and we'll see some great content on that. And that may well be part of some of the changes that come up. But yeah, we're pretty hopeful that we can get aircraft carriers back in as we used to have them.
So do you anticipate seeing aircraft carriers in, like, say, the next clan battle season?
I wouldn't go so far there. You've got some of the tiering systems, and you've got a few factors. I wouldn't want to nail down to saying the next clan, but hopefully in the future. I mean, part of the question there was particularly in regards to like spotting and stuff. Obviously, we've changed some of the spotting things so that planes don't spot torpedoes and things like this. So even that was a part of competitive CV gameplay. That was quite a key factor. So once you remove that, there's a level of defense that the CV provided that won't exist in clans, and how even just that little aspect might affect it, we don't know.
Do you have any information on how and why that decision was made? Particularly the torpedo not spotting one?
We've released some documentation to you guys for some of the rationale behind it. And if you go back through, I was reading some of it today, and it's to improve that interaction with destroyers. So destroyers could potentially be harassed more so than another class. And there's the other aspect where, let's say your planes are flying back to the carrier as well on that flight path. If they were to spot torpedoes on there, it's another aspect. So certainly in particular with the scenario where they finish their attack run and go up, there's the other aspect that they then fly at an altitude where they don't spot, they don't provide intelligence to the team, and then the enemy team don't get intelligence, therefore on the planes. So there's sort of a double-edged sword on that aspect, but fundamentally it was really to stop that singling out and harassment of one class by another.
Fair enough. Well, I guess let's talk about where the rework goes from here a little bit. And so from fellow CC and Wiki editor Lord Zath, would like to ask, how quickly can Wargaming implement further changes in future updates based on player feedback and performance statistics? And will Wargaming be assigning additional assets to this in order to monitor the reworked CVs and resolve issues quickly?
Okay, so the first part of the question with changes, it really depends on the exact change and the specific update. So, for instance, if it's simply a balance edit, maybe damage output or something along these lines, yeah, that's pretty fast, and that can be implemented sort of the next patch potentially. If it's more sort of very much more development wise, then it really is really difficult. It can be quite complex in terms of coding and implementation of how you do things. One example being, in theory, players thought that, line of sight for radar, you've already got the line of sight mechanic, so just whack that in. Well, there was both the coding of it and then the implementation of it that was deemed to be ineffective and very difficult to do. So there's one aspect of what something can seem very simple but takes a good while to test, to actually then see how it fits in the gameplay, and also the ramification and impact it has on both the ship class and other ship classes. So there's just a lot of aspects in it. So yeah, that does depend on the particular bit. Regarding will Wargaming be assigning additional assets and so on to monitor the CVs? Yeah, I mean we've got people who are dedicated to the aircraft carriers, and we don't want to be missing any aspects. So that there are people who it's their job to be monitoring this. So we believe that we've allocated the resources, the necessary resources required for CVs. If we identify that we're lacking in some way or there's a critical problem, then of course additional people will be allocated to the task.
Fair enough. Well, the next few questions come from Farazella, who we were just talking about it. So I guess he wants to know some kind of I don't know how to put this, but he has some kind of questions about what's coming down the pipe that we still haven't seen. So what are some of the ballpark timelines for additions to the carrier lines for things like the Royal Navy carriers, second carrier lines, and any future carriers that might come out in upcoming patches?
Yeah, obviously I can't give out dates, but at Wargaming Fest we announced we announced the HMS Hermes, HMS Implacable, Audacious, and I believe Indomitable. So we know that these Royal Navy CVs are going to be coming out hopefully in 2019. That's pretty fair to say. So we've definitely got that aspect. You've got the interesting side question there with kind of other carrier lines, and by that I think that's something we've touched on with bringing variety to the carrier gameplay and maybe, dare I say, kind of support carriers. I think we touched on it in Devblog actually with regards to support carriers. So this kind of different play style for CVs. So that's another thing to look forward to coming up in 2019. But I can't give dates for poor Farah, who I know is going to be chomping at the bit with regards to CV.
I don't. He definitely wasn't asking for dates. I don't think. I think he was just asking for kind of he used the word ballpark, so I knew he knows that you're not going to get dates, but I guess he wanted to know what the kind of priority was.
Yes, there. So definitely we've announced Royal Navy CVs at Wargaming Fest. They're going to be a priority for us. So they're going to be the first ones. I'd hope to see them in the first quarter, maybe second quarter if the rework throws any sort of problems our way, it causes any kind of delays like that. But yeah, I'd hope for around about that mark.
So I'm taking a sidestep for a second. You and I a long time ago talked about the Royal Navy battleships before they came into the game. Now that we have Royal Navy aircraft carriers, the ones that they announced, are you as an Englishman happy with the ones that they announced? And because there's some important ships that I kind of felt like we're missing, that Glorious, Illustrious, Ark Royal. I mean, these ships that these are the ones that everybody knows in the Royal Navy aircraft carriers, but they're not the ones that we're getting.
No, there's I think even back then when we discussed Royal Navy battleships, I think I even had the attitude back then, kind of like wait and see, and it's definitely been highlighted to me recently from dealing with community questions that just because we don't say something doesn't mean it's not going to be included or isn't being thought about or isn't going to happen. With Ark Royal, I was just reading through a Reddit thread actually regarding some of the Royal Navy CVs, and no, it was a forum, and the point was made about Ark Royal, and even the community's response was definitely a premium. So even the community believes that certain ones that were missed from the original announcement will come into the game in some form. I'm not confirming that Ark Royal is going to be a premium. I really don't know. I genuinely don't know on that aspect. But there's going to be different ways that maybe these ships will slip in. You've mentioned quite a few more that could be added into the game, and we're only talking the even tiers of 4, 6, 8, and 10. Hopefully in time maybe we'll see the odd tiers, or if we see a second branch of different style of carriers, that's where Illustrious and the like will come in. Time will tell.
Speaking of the premium CVs though, are there any plans to sell premium CVs that weren't for sale anymore, like Graf Zeppelin or Enterprise?
Absolutely. I guess there's another aspect to the CV rework. Not necessarily like a base goal, but one of the beneficial side effects is it gives us the opportunity to rework the CVs that we had to, certainly Graf Zeppelin being one case, that we had to stop selling for the reasons that we had in game. So we can adjust the play styles, kind of go back to the drawing board almost with these ones. And I don't think it's too early to say that CCs will be getting their hands on Kaga, Saipan, Enterprise, and Graf Zeppelin on the third iteration of the public test. So viewers will be able to see this very early work in progress versions of these premiums, and I'm sure Graf Zeppelin is going to be one that people want to pay a close eye on and give a lot of attention to. So that's hopefully something that we're going to be reintroducing. Obviously, we don't want any ship to not be available for sale. It's not in our interest. So if we can find a way, then yeah, we'll definitely do our best.
So do you anticipate that the premium carriers, the ones that you mentioned that we're going to get, that the CCs are going to see in the patch, are they going to be part of the 080 patch, or do you think that they'll be coming later?
I do believe they'll be coming later. As I said, these are very much work in progress at the moment. We're going to focus on the core sort of gameplay and concept of CVs in general, then how the premiums fit in, because they're obviously going to have their unique flavors and tastes. So we've got people working on obviously the premium CVs specifically, making sure that they're balanced, so that they're balanced and they give that variety to gameplay.
Hey, Kalorn.
That's a greeting from Evan.
Oh, hey, how you doing, Evan? Are things on fire there, and is everything fine?
Yeah, it's always fine. This is fine.
Oh man, like that was like the biggest joke during the CC summit, is that this is fine.
Right.
I always want to make
like,
get the,
you see it.
Get the little the dog in the fire that's saying this is fine, and then paste Evan's face.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. But yeah,
but my Photoshop skills are inadequate. So if anybody knows how to do that, please, I would share that all over the place.
Yeah, I'm sure Reddit will come to the rescue.
So you actually answered Farah's next question, which was about the premium carriers. So we will move on to Farah's last question, which is: under the rework, will carriers be able to division together?
No. That's the easy one to answer. That's very succinct. No, that's never been the case, and we don't intend to make it. So we don't really see much benefit to the game to allow it to just go back just a tiny step. Everything I've mentioned regarding premium CVs and a lot of other information regarding CVs. For those listening who may still have more questions, we will be publishing a series of far more in-depth articles covering these topics in the very near future.
Well, yeah, keep an eye on the dev blog, because I'm assuming that's where they'll be, right, Gray?
Yeah, portal. I think this is a pretty wide-ranging topic that a lot of players are interested in, so we're going to be publishing them direct to the portal.
Excellent. Well, I think that there's been a lot of I have been happy with the level of communication that you guys have had on the carriers. I mean, there have been a lot of things that people want it going faster, but we all I think understand that there's a certain amount of time that this kind of development does take. That said, you guys have communicated when you've been able to. Has then been part of kind of the policy about CV the rework is to try and be that open, or I guess what have you guys been doing? What has your thoughts been on how you guys are handling the information dissemination?
It's not just limited to CVs; it's in general for sort of any real topic that pops up. I can't really think of much else that's as close to players' hearts or the community, but certainly on this one, we know that it's something everyone either is invested in or is could feel the effects of. So we really are doing our best to be as proactive as possible with sharing it exactly as much as we can, as soon as we can, to everyone, even if it means it's not ideal to give CC's information under NDA. I'm fully aware of that, and I know my colleagues are as well. But if it is helpful for CC's to even just to say, look, there's a certain issue, Wargaming are aware of it, that has at least some value to to just saying, well, I don't know, I'm not sure. So at least even if we can just do a certain small step, we definitely see that as far more beneficial to both parties, us and players, to do that. So we will try and keep that up with any questions or issues that pop up. And we've got a presence in pretty much every social media outlet, every internet outlet that you can think of, and players are encouraged to get on there and share that feedback. So if they feel that any information is missing, that we can be prompted to cover it, because sometimes we don't think of everything, and when you're sitting this side of the computer screen, so to speak, you might not always be might not always identify something that someone the other side of the computer screen is aware of or mindful of or wants to know.
And you have to have pretty thick skin on your side of the computer screen, I'm assuming, right?
you do, in patience of a saint, if I say so myself.
Oh, well, I realize that this guy has been pretty onerous for you guys as well, and I think that it's been tough on the community, in general. I mean, they're looking at, there's a certain segment of the community that they're looking at the death of their favorite kind of gameplay. And, I think that, there's a certain amount of deference that needs to be given to that. But at the same time, I don't feel like you guys are trying to stomp on them either.
No, and I've touched on it before in the podcast here, specifically with Farah. There's a lot of sympathy for those players. They may not be the majority of players, but it doesn't mean they're not important to the game. And many of us, even in the dev team, enjoy carriers, and I'm sure that they're sort of mourning the loss, but it's all with the understanding that it really is for the good of the game. This is, or has been, an elephant in the room for a good while, or it's at least been something we've attempted to address through other means. We feel that we exhausted all other avenues before the rework. We wanted to obviously keep those players happy, but we've arrived at this stage because there really is no other alternative to keep carriers in the game and achieve all of the sort of stated targets that we want to hit.
It's actually kind of funny. I've been noticing that there's a significantly larger number of carriers being played right now on the live server than I have been seeing recently. And I kind of feel like there's a certain bunch of people that are just, they're trying to get their last enjoyment out of it before it goes away.
I think there's two aspects to that. I've also observed that myself, also even in ranked sprint, actually. But I've noticed that, and I think it's two-sided. I think there's people who are quickly grinding up as many of the carriers that they can get to for the compensation scheme that's coming through that we've published, whereby you can sort of get free XP reassigned and so on and so forth. I don't need to go into too much depth on that now. So I think there's those people who want to make hay while the sun shines. And then, I'm pretty certain that there's also others who are just, how do you call it, a last hurrah? I don't want to say swan song because that's a bit too melancholy, but just kind of enjoying the time they have left.
The Graf Zeppelin players, like I don't know. Have you play a lot of Graf Zeppelin, Gray? I mean, because it's one of those premiums that, like, if you know how to make Graf Zeppelin work, it can be really devastating.
I played most of it when I was a CC, when we had it on the multiple test iterations. I should be honest, I didn't like the testing process. I got pretty sick of the ship, really, because we were given so many different iterations of it and versions and tweaks that I sort of lost track of all the changes, and I just stuck to my faithful Saipan. But in recent times, I played it now and then. I don't get too much of a kick out of it. I personally feel a little bit dirty playing it, and I know that other people don't really like to be on the receiving end of it. So I use one of my other 157 ships or something in the game and enjoy those.
But that red camo, man, it just looks so awesome.
Yeah, strike fear into the enemy.
All right, well, I think that that does it about carriers. Vanessa, Arun, did you guys have any final carrier questions before we move on to some of the other things that we have to talk about with Gray?
Yes. Gray, would you specifically play carriers after the rework?
That's a really good question. I'll give you a little personal insight, less of the Wargaming employee here and more of the player. I actually sympathized with the community when they felt that initially, in the first sort of, was it the TST, the testing server, that it wasn't immersive enough. There was too rinse and repeat. Initially, I did feel the same way, but having played it now on the public test, something's changed, because I did find myself, maybe it was from watching Farah's videos where he illustrated that there was more layers of depth that possibly even the devs weren't even aware of, where he was tweaking with things. So the strategy of placing fighters, there seemed to be this onion that was starting to be unpeeled. So I really genuinely found myself enjoying playing the different lines. So then with the AP dive bombers that have now been put on the American aircraft carriers, I enjoyed playing those and mixing around with the army distance and then the payloads. So there are the tiny Tims that you can have with the rockets, and there seems to be enough, and hopefully there'll be more of this ability to really mix things up and give it that immersion and depth that I think was missing early on. So yeah, I genuinely think I will not just play them, but actually enjoy them.
Vanessa, how about you? Do you have any questions for Gray before we move on?
Honestly, really can't think of anything. No.
I've got a question for Arun. Will you be playing them? Have you played them? Have you enjoyed them?
Oh yeah, I've played them quite a lot. I was actually skeptical of the same thing as you were, that it might end up being too stale. But I felt this way when we first saw them at Wargaming, and I thought that was my main problem. But once I tried it, I found the same thing as you did. There's so much depth in it that you can find really cool things to do. For example, the arming distance thing, that's what I did in the last test when I tried like tier 4s, and the Hosha was really, really weak. However, I found out that you could citadel like battleships with them if you dropped the bombs really, really, really early. And that felt really interesting to me. I just felt that it was weird that the tier 4 had to do it, but not the higher tier ones. But, test is a test.
You've touched on a big aspect where that was something that I only came aware of sort of late, as one of the devs was having a discussion with one of my colleagues, and I just overheard. And it was the introduction of the kind of ballistic characteristic to the AP bombers. So now not only was it just dive bombing, but it was the timing of the dive that was critical in determining whether you penned the ship that you're aiming at. So if you decided to go low, then you would have more of a shell fired from a ship sort of trajectory. But if you had it high, you'd then have the plunging fire. So that's something that players might not have been aware of. But yeah, it's cool. And it's good to hear from you, Arun. You enjoyed your RTS carriers back in the day, and it's really good to hear that you're enjoying the new versions.
Yep, I will definitely play them quite a lot more than I play the RTS right now, at least.
Wow, that's a strong statement, actually. Wow, that's good to hear.
Did you have any further questions for us, Gray?
Well, I guess for Vanessa, you don't have any questions, but what's been your perception of it all?
Well, I've mainly been taking kind of a wait and see. I didn't get to test it there locally when you guys first tested it, and doing the TST and just kind of doing my initial rounds in it. It's definitely different, and someone who obviously loves aviation, think I would just be incredibly all over this, but my initial impressions were kind of, it is a bit repetitive, but I have been, watching Farah and, just kind of see how he's really kind of unfolded, especially when he's been doing all this midway testing. It's really kind of, I don't want to say eye opening, but a different experience and different, engagement that he was kind of showing. And so honestly, I'm just going to take kind of a wait and see. I'm very, as I see, the planes kind of move around the map, and especially how quickly they were moving at tier 10, it definitely is going to change gameplay. And I don't want to say that I'm very apprehensive, but I'm just playing a wait and see. And I just want to kind of see, just how the meta shifts and how things kind of work out when we start actually getting this in the live environment, and people are playing them, and people are reacting, and just how the game is going to be, say, in a year, how we come along. That's more or less just kind of my view. Like, how are things going to play out? How's the game going to be in a year when we've had this change, and how people are going to adjust to everything that's just kind of going along with us.
Yeah, I think you've kind of got all opinions represented between you guys hosting and some of your guests, where you've got those carrier mains who, if they're like Farah, have kind of jumped right into the pool. There's those who've written it off completely. Nope, I'm going to sell all my CVs. Not ever going to touch it. It's broken. It's dead to me. That's fine. Then you got people like yourself who are going to sit back and just watch, wait and see. Yeah, and then people like Arun, I don't think you'd class yourself as a main, but then someone like yourself who's sort of more open to dip their toe in the water, so to speak.
So I guess, Gray, are you guys looking for an increase in carrier participation in battles as a result of the rework to determine that it's successful, or is there some other metric that you guys kind of have in mind?
No, I think that's very fair to say. Yeah, we would very much like to see a higher adoption and exploration of the line and class. We've Erin mentioned sort of our whole show. We've added in the torpedo bomber wave to down at tier 4 to give that more rounded experience based on feedback. So we really hope. That was identified as something that maybe could put players off and wasn't a representative experience. So overall, one of the stated aims was, in addition to what I've said, was that a very small percentage of the players actually fully adopted the line and the style of gameplay. This we hope to solve and improve on with the rework. Now, I can already hear listeners of the podcast go, yeah, but of course this is new, so everyone's going to jump in. So what, are you going to claim success just because in the opening weeks of 0.8.0 loads of people play carriers? No, obviously we're going to continue monitoring the statistics there, but I personally fully believe, and correct me if you think differently, but I do believe that people who will start out as curious, maybe like Vanessa, who is sitting on the fence a little bit, will give them a go. I don't expect them all to become carrier mains or to be completely unarmored and research every one of the tech trees that comes out, but will enjoy it more so and may find themselves dipping into it for a bit of a break from the other classes from time to time. So overall, see a far larger adoption and participation with that class.
Alrighty. Well, I do have some other things that I would like to talk about today. And the first one on my list is the state of Supercruisers and the fire duration change. Some of the CCs and us included here at the podcast have adopted the Supercruiser label for the the large gun cruisers at tier 9 and tier 10 gray. Is that something that's happened internally as well, or do you guys have a different designation that you go with?
Actually, when I looked through, I really liked this designation of Supercruiser, because I struggled with this, because I went to my colleagues. I was saying, "Hang on, guys, what are we calling this?" Because if you call it heavy cruiser, that's got a specific naval connotation to it. There are treaties that are kind of around the definition of heavy cruiser, and we already have those in the game. It's determined by armament, and then you got Washington treaties and so forth. So I was struggling about it, and large cruisers may fit the bill better, but isn't as impressive. So I really have to commend you for coming up with Supercruiser. I think it's also quite fitting with it. With regards to them,
to be fair, I did not come up with it. I think that I stole it from Stuntman. I think I heard it on one of his videos, and I was like, I'm using that from now on.
Definitely, well done, Stuntman. Yeah, I think even internally I might push to adopt Supercruiser as the classification there.
So we have, with 2 Supercruisers in the game and 2 more on the horizon, have the developers as a whole been happy with the big run Supercruisers and how they've slotted into the game? Was the fire duration change to the Supercruisers something that has been in the wings for a while? Is it a response to how they see those ships have been playing, or is it something that they're kind of experimenting with?
So to start with the first part of the question, ultimately, we're happy with how they've slotted into the game. We put the idea of their introduction was similar to that of history. So to create a cruiser with cruiser-like armor, so they're relatively light armored, but they have a powerful armament with the cost of having a battleship, DPM, maneuverability, and concealment. So there was going to be this trade-off between the cruisers. From my discussions with the balance and dev team, we're happy with how they're settled into the game, and we feel we're improving them, and each one that we introduce is doing better at fulfilling that sort of premise and that role. With regards to the fire duration change, yes, any change that we implement is the result of observation of data, identification of where an improvement can be made based on the interpretation of that data, the testing of that theory of a solution before we finally introduce it. So certainly when we looked at the data regarding their survivability, it was quite obvious that something had to be done. The theory of the solution was that extending the duration of fires on them from 30 to 45 seconds would just tweak and help reduce it enough to not hurt the class too much, but also allow them to fit in the game better. So yeah, that was something we thought about for a while, tested for a bit, and now we're introducing it.
So one of the things that I kind of noticed about this change is that it's making the Supercruisers more vulnerable to other cruisers, something that really the Supercruisers I found are mostly bullies for the cruisers and the heavy cruisers and light cruisers in the game. At the same time, it doesn't really do anything for most of the battleships in the game, which I do find to be relatively effective in countering the Supercruisers. Was that something that was part of this aspect in doing a fire duration change for the Supercruisers, as opposed to changing something about their armor layout?
I mean, from my perspective and interpretation of this, it isn't something regarding battleships so much, because, and we'll ignore HE firing battleships for a moment. For the most part, the most common ammunition that a battleship will fire is armor piercing. Supercruisers that sort of sit their bow on can, even though they do have light armor, tend to be armored enough to get a deflection. So yeah, the HE is to help the other cruisers dig them out of that sort of entrenched position that they've got themselves into, so they can't just sit there and just tank away, almost like a battleship. So
previously, when we've asked about tier 9 ranked to specifically Wargaming employees, we were told that it was not going to happen. Pretty I don't know what
explicitly.
The word yeah, explicitly. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. Can't use my words today. Mainly due to the low population at tier 9. So have the tier 9 premiums in general and the Supercruisers in particular changed that enough for Wargaming to have this upcoming ranked season be tier 9? Or was there some other thoughts about a tier 9 ranked season? Did they want to have a ranked season that didn't have carriers while the rework was still, in, as you say, going to be adjusted and tested going forward on the live servers?
So I actually personally had a chat with Andrei Lisak about this in particular, and I think we posted it on the dev blog because I then drafted a bit of an explanation with regards to tier 9 ranked. So it was less about the Supercruisers. It was kind of an evolution of the idea of shaking up the meta and shaking up ranked. So we had this game mode that was introduced, which was Arms Race. It proved to be very popular. We liked that. That was great in the Arms Race format, and players gave us a lot of good feedback. So we wanted. There were complaints about ranked. Certainly ranked at tier 10. Certainly clan players felt a bit burnt out by it. So we knew that we didn't want to just keep things at tier 10. The other tiers have been done before and been tried. We haven't done tier 9 yet. So it was suggested that we do tier 9. Arms Race seemed to be ideal for solving for some of these criticisms, and I'll get a bit more specific on that. So if we just say camping, fairly stale, sort of bow in, as we kind of discuss, sort of tier 10s, tier 9s, sort of just, well, specifically tier 10s in the last ranked sort of thing, just sitting there. So it wasn't very enjoyable. We hope that Arms Race will create this dynamic, fluid battle for players. We've then had tier 9 premiums, as you've mentioned, sort of coming in, and these Supercruisers as well have been part of that. And people haven't had a chance to pitch these ships in battle yet. It's kind of, this is actually, to be fair, a bit of an experiment on our part, both for the game mode, both for the tier as well, and it gives people a chance to test the Missouris, Musashis, all those other ones that they've got, that they've managed to get. They've been sitting in port, and they haven't had a chance to really test their mettle in.
Well, I do want to give to touch on something that you just said. Is Wargaming concerned about some of the premium tier 9, specifically Missouri and Musashi, and maybe even John Bart to some degree, and their effect on a tier 9 ranked season? Are they concerned that that at tier 9 those ships will be clearly better than their tech tree counterparts? Oh, and Black. Aaron just brought up Black as well.
Sure, yeah. Black was in my mind as well. Not overly concerned. No, not to the point where we feel there's a massive game-breaking thing. These ships are all sort of constantly monitored. So if we did have particular issues with them, they would be addressed in sort of balance. A dev blog post would be made first, and then we'd be announcing it. I've just had a little look for you regarding the ranked season stuff that I put there. The other thing to mention about the ranked is obviously the shorter duration that we put in. The other aspect that was good to bring up was the timing as well with 0.8 and the Snowflake event. So we were aware that at tier 9 people may have bought back previous tier 9s so they could get the snowflakes knocked off. So to give them better sort of value for money, so to speak, having it at tier 9 would also help them. The other thing, which lends into the big topic of discussion, is the class of ship that is naturally absent at tier 9 now, and that's of course CVs. So we don't have to exclude them. So if it was at tier 8 or around there, we'd have to exclude CVs, and we don't want to do that. So having a tier 9 is ideal. I've mentioned the fact that we've got these new ships that players haven't had a chance to test. So we're also going to be doing the 6v6 as well, 6v6 format. So there are a few changes there with regards to kind of why it's tier 9 and why these changes have been made.
All those are really great information. and I agree with most of it. I guess my question that didn't quite get fully answered was, does Wargaming see some of the premium ships as being too powerful at tier 9?
Sorry, no, not currently. Jean Bart was recently introduced and went through sort of all the testing, and the CCs went through it. You do raise a good point there with regards to the scenario as well. So at this point in time, I can say no, it's fine. They've been through the testing and balancing, and they're deemed to be okay. But eyes will be watching this competitive scenario. So tier 9 ranked, we already see impacts of different ships when they're in different scenarios, such as clan battles. So ships do perform differently in their output and efficiency. So we may well see, maybe this will highlight some areas and aspects that need tweaking. So at this point, no, but time will tell with this change of game mode.
So we've got one more topic to talk about before we call it a day. But before we do that, Arun, Vanessa, did you guys have any questions for Gray on the Supercruisers or the ranked season?
Nope.
So one of the things that I always kind of felt about tier 9 being a great candidate for ranked was that the fact for the longest time that there was really no premiums at tier 9, so that you could get this environment where you could actually have a balanced tech tree on tech tree ranked scenario. And has Wargaming ever thought internally of maybe kind of not having premiums involved in a ranked scenario and doing tier 9 or whatever tier without premiums?
I'm not aware of any sort of thought process going along those lines, really, to exclude premiums. When premiums are introduced, obviously we hope they're balanced with their peers. I do understand to a point where you're coming from, and if people want to get pernickety, we can say freemiums and premiums, but I guess the short answer is no. We've not really looked to exclude them.
Well, tier 1 is, without premiums.
I would buy that.
That would be horrifically.
But it's also one class of ship.
This is true. So yesterday, Gray, there was a huge list of changes that are coming to a whole host of ships, from Izumo to Key to Nagato to Colorado, Dunkirk, Hood, Igel, Mahan, Sims, and a couple of other things with some of the Russian destroyers. How did all this kind of get dumped at once? It just feels like a lot of changes all at one time. Was there a reasoning behind trying to do them all kind of together? And, on top of, we've got a major change with the rework coming at the same time. What was the background here?
I can't really tell you why so many in one fell swoop. Really, but from the ones that I've seen and from my experience so far, over 7 months of Wargaming, these are all prime candidates that players have wanted to see, and it has been amusing that despite all these changes, and we can say that most of them are pretty good buffs that the player base have called for, it does make me chuckle to then see some other random ship cited and buff for this ship when. And it's wow, how many buffs do you need to ships that you wanted?
To be fair,
Hood.
Ibuki needs some help. Somebody needs to take a look at Ibuki and make it not a floating citadel. That's all I'm saying.
Sure. Well, I'm sure someone's monitoring her survivability, and I think, didn't she have some changes recently? I lose track. I've been
had so many come through. It's hard to keep track anymore.
Yeah, it is a bit. But these have been hugely welcomed changes, especially to HMS Hood. We yet see the fuse.
What's hilarious? What's hilarious is that I posted this particular one to my the Warships podcast Facebook page yesterday, and I got a 3-paragraph rant from somebody about how HMS Hood was being ruined, and that he was going to sell his HMS Hood. And I was like, I don't think you quite understand how this is going to affect the play. But I had to leave that one alone.
there's been two. Obviously, most people celebrating like woohoo, hooray! The Sigma's getting increased and the AP fuse delays being increased. But then others have been saying, no, actually, you don't realize it's a hidden nerf because they haven't changed the crop factor, so the penetration, and there is no mention of that in those for the public facing stuff. So. From the face of it, sure. So we got it, but these are addressing the two key complaints that we identified from players was the Sigma, and the struggles with the fuse timing of it, so not detonating and getting the Citadel. So hopefully, we've managed to address those, and that's just to center in one. I've picked Hood, not out of national bias. I'll assure you, it's been through my examining of the top Reddit stuff.
So I guess one thing I've noticed with these changes and with changes in the past, Wargaming is much more willing to adjust Sigma values for guns than affect dispersion values. Is that something that's kind of systemic to you guys' way of thinking about how to adjust and balance ships?
I can't. I'm not without speaking to the balancing guys why it is that the Sigma value is changed. I often see it used. Possibly it's because it's so well recognized by players, they can immediately see that change, and that's the one they understand, relate to. I don't think it's just that solely. There's probably numerous more factors that I'm not privy to as to why that's the case.
Yeah, I did throw that one out. You didn't give me a chance to get that one answered. So I do apologize for that. But it is something that I have kind of noted over the years, and I kind of wonder if they're trying to keep dispersion constant while they adjust other things. So, so last question of the day, Gray.
Mm-hmm.
2019 has begun, and each of the last 3 years in World of Warships has kind of felt bigger than bigger and bigger than the last one. So what about 2019 should the players be excited about, and how enthusiastic are you personally for 2019 in World of Warships?
As Arun sort of commented, year of the CVs when, well, maybe it's finally time. Obviously, we've touched on Royal Navy CVs, but again, at Wargaming Fest, for those who are paying attention, we also announced the Russian battleships are coming in. So we've got a lot of new content coming probably fairly early on in 2019. We've got a massive, obviously, rework that we've discussed at length now. So we've got a new gameplay style, new content, new game modes coming in. It is set to be quite probably a bigger year than those prior, as you kind of discussed. So I'm quietly optimistic about everything and how the players are going to react to the direction that the game's going to, and hopefully the player base will continue to grow and the community will continue to grow. We've seen Twitch streamers growing massively recently as the players and the game gets more popular and the community increases. We're obviously looking to keep our efforts up with promoting the game, as we've said, kind of with communication and everything, working with players. So with the combination of new gameplay that's more accessible, with highly anticipated content in the form of these Royal Navy CVs, with maybe the likes of Ark Royal, who knows, coming in, some home, I don't know how to call them, sort of like home names, household names. That's the word I'm looking for. Then we've got the likes of the premium Lenin, which looks like a Nelson. We've got like little curiosities thrown in there as well. We've got an amazing year ahead of us, and we've only just begun.
So I know you can't talk about them specifically, but are there surprises waiting for people that haven't even been teased yet, that are waiting in the wings?
Quite possibly. We teased one last year, didn't we? I'm not going to say it.
Yeah, no, there's definitely been some teasing going on. But it's good.
And then who knows what April Fools will be this year? Who knows?
Oh man, ducks in a bathtub, I bet.
Well, yeah, I did enjoy the bathtub.
It's been a great year so far, and I definitely am looking forward to things. I have some concerns and some leeriness about the Russian battleships, but we'll see how they turn out as well. Vanessa, Arun, did you guys have any final questions for Gray before we wrap it up for the day?
Nope.
No, I'm glad to hear that your experience is coming along well, and that your adjustment and everything is good. And it's kind of awesome how we used to have you on the podcast and talk to you, and now you're there working for Wargaming as well as Kami Samurai and some other people that we know. And it's just really awesome to see people that we know and now in Wargaming and growing. And it's just, this game's growing. Looking forward to 2019, hopefully, as Arun was year of the CV win. But seriously, we have carriers coming. We have the Russian battleships. It just it's going to be interesting with everything that's coming on down the line.
Actually, I do have a question. Are you playing on which server are you now playing on? Are you playing on the Russian server or whichever server?
I'm still playing on my EU, which is a little bit problematic some times of the day. So often early times of the day when I want to go in, like rank sprint was a problem because with the 3-hour time difference, obviously I need to wait for EU to catch up. Of course, I have accounts on all the servers. I don't think I've played on Asia to date yet. I probably should. But NA and CIS, I think my Steam account is on CIS on the Russian one, and I had good fun grinding out the ships there. And actually, I would recommend that players do play on other servers to get back in touch with the experience, as we've seen with some of the World of Tanks. I think Quickie Baby's done like a free-to-play thing. I think for players to refresh themselves now and then, to go back, I try and do it myself. So go back through maybe ships that you forgot about, such as maybe Furutaka or some of these old golden oldies that are hiding in the tech tree. Try and re-explore them on other servers and enjoy the game all over again, so to speak. And of course, buy premium.
I will say one thing, Gray, is that when I did create an account on another server and I had nothing and I had to start from nothing, I forgot how hard this game can be to progress when you don't have flags and camos and premium ships and premium time and all the things that we kind of take for granted now. And when I'm I've been grinding the German destroyers and the alternate IJN destroyer line, and I'm getting 10, 15, 20, 25,000 XP a game. You can't do that if you have nothing, and man, is it difficult.
Yeah, but it's eye-opening and it's cool. I love pitting my wits against other servers. So when I went over to CIS, so yeah, you're starting out in your stock, I'm going to say Galloisionnaire. I hadn't researched the French line too far on EU, I don't think. So I thought, I'm on this new server. I'm going to grind out a new tech tree. And here I go and pitting my wits. And then the wins were just so much more gratifying. It was great. I was like, skill beat you. I didn't have all the mod cons with me. And then getting used to the different meta on the server actually as well. That was quite cool. That was quite fun, seeing how well you stack up. But definitely worth doing.
Go try playing South Carolina at tier 3. That thing is ridiculously overpowered. Like 80, 100, 150,000 damage games in a tier 3. Totally possible with that.
Yeah,
ship.
That's hilarious. But when I think back to my first South Carolina days, I was like, what? It was all frustration. And then you go back, and let's say even if you went in a Nassau, you probably don't play tier 3s. The most players don't play tier 3s. They're a hell of a lot of fun. Oh, I might be wrong, actually. Hang on, is Nassau? Oh, there's a rookie error if I got the tier wrong.
Nope,
it depends on
tier
that,
3.
Isn't it? Yeah, phew. End of the day and tired.
Alrighty. Well, I'm trying to remember the first time we had you on the show, Gray, and it's been so long that I don't even remember anymore.
No. I am on Facebook. I posted one of those stupid photos, like 2009 to 2019, and of course
I'm resisting that.
Wrong. Yeah, I got the date wrong, and my daughter said, "Actually, that's 2002." I was like, what? So great,
man, throwing you
I'm
under
old.
the bus. That's rough.
I'm super old.
Well, that's it for this week, folks. We want to thank iEarlgrey for coming on the show and giving us so much information. It's been letting us grill him a bit.
Pleasure as always.
For sure. As always, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Warships Podcast and Twitter at Warships Podcast for updates between episodes. Don't forget to check out Arun on YouTube and Twitch as well. We, of course, want to thank our amazing Patreon backers. If you're interested in supporting us, please consider becoming a backer yourself. Backers are the way that we put the show together on a weekly basis, and you guys are the reason that we are able to put out a podcast. So thank you very much. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next week.